Hello! Today I would like to present to you a few points from a 19th century book called The Essence of Life. Not only because the book is worth reading as such, but also to show you how much self-aware were people in those times. The passages which I'm gonna discuss will be in part 3. The first two parts of the trilogy to which this book belongs are called God, the Irrefutable Science, and What Does a Human Consist of? Life and Death. The author is Airships, and the trilogy is called Basis of the Genuine Science. According to some sources, it was even used as a textbook to educate the officers of the Royal Army of Russia at that time. The passages of the book which I'm gonna point your attention to concern the lifestyle of the people on the other planets of our solar system. Now, is the actual situation on Venus, Mars, etc. really as described in this book? I don't have the slightest clue myself, and I'm presenting the material purely as something inspirational or philosophical compilation with the thoughts of somebody in that era about the life on the lower and higher spheres of existence. As you will notice, the presented material is very much in line with the Vedic view about life and death, and how is life in the other planes of existence. And the Vedic view, together with the Zoroastrian, is the closest that we have to what really people thought and believed thousands of years ago. The rest of the historic accounts are much more diluted or edited on purpose to conceal the truth from us. So the material is very much attuned with the Vedic view of life and death, and yet it is a Christian literature written by Christians for Christians, and according to the author himself, based on revelations and visions of Christian saints. Or maybe the Christian people were like this at that time. I wouldn't be surprised at all, although it would be a drastic difference from the Christians we know them nowadays. But keeping in mind all the lies that we have been told about history as exposed in the series of documentaries, The Survivors of Atlantis and Hyperborea, keeping in mind all that, it wouldn't surprise me at the slightest if the Christians indeed had a mindset coherent with the line of thinking of these books. These are the official images, so to say, of the other planets in the solar system, kind courtesy of the penguins. Of course, everything is photoshopped. We have no clue where do the space missions actually reach, what do they find. Life on Venus. The newly created by God souls are first taken to Venus, where their respective spiritual guardians take them in a form invisible to the residents of Venus to look around and explain to them what is good and what is bad. The mentor spirits of the young soul offer them the opportunity to take birth on Venus, and although the living conditions there are very difficult and, should we say, deplorable for earthly standards, most of the young souls agree to incarnate in such a way with great enthusiasm just because they're very inexperienced and they're in a kind of euphoric state because of this recent transition that they have made from unmanifested state to manifest. All they understand at this point is that they are alive and that's precious and they enjoy it. And that's why usually they would agree to take any sort of incarnation just for the sake of experiencing a new life form. Their mentor spirit warns them that there will be no guardian angel during this incarnation and they will be fully responsible for all their actions. And so the soul takes a birth in a body on Venus, where the humans are kind of similar to us, but they would be 4 times bigger and much heavier and clumsier than us. And so is the entire environment. For example, the air is so dense that for an earthly person it would feel like water. While the water on Venus would be so dense for earthly standards that we could walk on it. The vegetation is similar to that of Earth, but is not as nice. And it's very hard. The trees would be 10 times taller than the earthly trees. And they're so hard, they bend, but they would never break. The residents of Venus have not yet found a way to even cut them. There are barely any flower-giving plants. Fruits are rare, but they will have such hard shells that it will be very difficult to actually feed on them, something like our nuts, but very, very hard. The animal life is abundant, but it's mostly ferocious, mean predators. The people live in groups, maybe a couple of families together in a tree trunk or some sort of primitive shelter or cave. The idea of a private room or private space where one could sit and think or meditate by himself simply doesn't exist over there. They always spend their time in groups. Although they live in a community, they are not friendly to each other at all. They constantly fight, hurt, and kill each other, which is not even punishable over there. Mostly they eat animals or their fellow men which they have killed. Nobody bothers to cook anything. They swallow up everything raw and always on the spot as soon as they can get hold of it. It's quite common that the wild predators will also kill the residents of Venus just because they are too lazy to defend themselves and also they can't organize really some sort of defense as a group because they are too selfish and rude to be able to achieve any type of coordinated cooperation. Compassion and friendship are unheard of. Under these circumstances, of course, Venus is a favorite playground for the forces of evil. Moreover, the residents don't have guardian angels and much of a conscious understanding of what is good and bad anyway. The force of evil doesn't have the right to force any of the residents on Venus to commit bad actions. This is a law on Venus and everywhere else in the universe. However, to ignite and instigate evil thoughts which will result in evil actions, that is much easier for the evil spirits on Venus than anywhere else. In a way, one could say that the force of evil is doing a favor to these young souls. Because if anybody has got a propensity to something evil, even if it is very deep inside, and even if it is well buried, one day it will surface. If not aided by an external force, it will surface by itself. So, in a way, the force of evil is making a favor to these young souls, showing them, revealing to them to what kind of fall down eventually the propensity to evil will lead. Lifespan is short in that wretched realm. Rarely somebody would live up to 50 years. And although life is so harsh and unpalatable, the last thing that the residents of that place want is to part with it. Neither the numerous diseases nor all the other suffering can make them wish they're dead, even at the slightest. They struggle like wild animals against death, and until the last moment they refuse to accept their fate, having no clue what death is actually and where does it lead to. After the souls on Venus abandon their bodies, they continue their existence in the astral spheres, again on Venus, and at that point they reunite again with their mentor spirit, with whom they discuss and analyze what they have done during the life they had just had, and their personal mentor spirit can take them on a tour to other planets like Earth and Mars to show them how other souls which have already developed higher self-awareness can live. If the given soul at this point manages to realize how pathetic was its life on Venus and sincerely feels this determination to develop godly qualities, this by itself qualifies it for elevation to a place far more desirable than Venus. And in this way, the repentant, neophyte soul is transferred to Earth, which by itself makes it happy beyond description, because after the unforgiving conditions of life in Venus, for this new soul, life on Earth is like paradise. It's like its wildest dreams coming true. Because at this point, the lifestyle on Earth is the highest form of existence that the young soul, with its limited understanding, can comprehend. Upon arrival in the spheres of the earth, the young soul first makes itself familiar with the ways of life here while traveling in an astral body under the expert guidance of its mentor spirit. This time, the young soul itself suggests scenarios which will play during its future life on Earth. While on Venus, it was simply taking the suggestions of the mentor spirit, being totally inexperienced. De facto, when the soul is born in a tangible body on Earth, it is already by default in a quite complicated situation. On one side, its personality is already stained and contaminated with the dirt of all the evil of Venus, and on the other, this unexperienced soul is trying to develop godly qualities in surroundings which are quite difficult, because rather sooner than later it transpires that the earth is not the paradise it was supposed to be. Eventually, as the new soul manages to learn its lessons on Earth and shows enough sincerity in cultivating angelic qualities, finally it gets the chance to get transferred to Mars. At this point, the soul is so happy, it's in ecstasy, its joy knows no boundary, because Mars now really seems like paradise after all that this being had to go through on Earth, which turned to be a place of both mental and physical hardships. Life on Mars. Upon arrival on Mars, first one is given Martian subtle body to get used to the overall situation, understand the ways of the people there. And also with this subtle body, the soul can travel to other planets because by then it has grown a lot in wisdom. Its understanding of the creative power of the Lord has widened a lot, and that's why it gets access to more realms. For many souls, this is a time for lots of travel and collecting new impressions and ideas of how to create one's reality. Although their mentor spirits would be still around, at this point the souls don't need the constant attention of a guardian angel and are fully mature for themselves to know what to do in order not to get into big trouble as they did on Venus. The mentor spirit can give various tasks according to the capacity of the developing and learning soul. For example, it can make them responsible for parts of the animal or plant kingdoms, or it can give them the task to look after the development and learning of lower and inexperienced creatures. During their long lives, the citizens of Mars engage themselves in various pleasurable activities, and love, kindness, and compassion are the way of life over there. At this point, the soul clearly understands that the purpose of its incarnation on Mars would be to strengthen its spirit by further understanding love and how it enriches the entities when it sparks between them. The soul understands that even in such paradise like environment, there will be challenges, there will be decisions to be made, and tests to be taken to prove and show how firm this soul is established in the qualities, in the angelic qualities of pure goodness. And that's why everybody who gets born over there has a guardian angel with which it can communicate even more openly than it did on Earth. All the residents of Mars are much more consciously aware of the purpose of their lives and incarnations compared to the residents of Earth, for example. That's why on Mars there are no countries or money or poverty, as the people simply don't need such social structures for what they are doing. There is no police in this heavenly place, nor courtrooms. The high self-awareness and understanding the power of goodness are more than enough to make the people their own judges. There are no big cities on Mars, because they are aware that this is yet another social structure designed to foster exploitation, uncleanliness, and everything else averse to godliness. An example of how people treat each other on Mars is that it is considered a sin not to help somebody or do a favor or show affection if you could have done so under the given circumstances. As their daily duty, the people on Mars consider to continuously invent newer and newer ways to make the people around them even happier than they already are. Although the concept of private property doesn't exist over there, still people have various objects in their houses. But in case they spot an item that they do not use at the moment and is kind of redundant, and at the same time it could be of use to somebody else, they would feel inside as thieves if they do not offer that object immediately to those who may make better use of it. All the people and animals on Mars are vegetarians and they eat only what grows from the ground, mostly fruits. In their language, there is no word for murder or kill, as the entire phenomena simply doesn't exist there. A destructive behavior or actions simply make no sense to them. If we would measure the lifespan of the residents of Mars in earthly years, it would be around 500. And in general, if we compare Mars to Earth, everything will look much lighter. For example, their water, we could breathe it, it's so light. The soil would seem so gentle and soft to an earthly resident that he won't be able to even walk on it. It would be like very soft snow or cotton. Most of the daily activities of the people on Mars are centered around making their very beautiful planet even more beautiful. For example, they're fond of creating new varieties of plant forms. They have lots of plants which glow at night, and this is widely used in their gorgeous gardens, which are magically lit at night. They also have lots of machines, vehicles, and tools which are very, very high tech. They use technologies which are unknown to us, the residents of Earth. To us, these tools and machines would look like as if they are self-propelled. A compulsory feature of all homes on Mars is that everybody will have their own private room for meditation and prayer. Otherwise, other aspects of their life and in general their appearance is quite close to that of the earthly residents, just with that big difference that they are stunningly beautiful. As far as daily practical stuff, for example, they wear clothes which are manufactured, but they don't have to buy them. When they need a new garment, they would just go to the manufacturing place, leave the old one, and take a new one. The most common method of transport over there are airships. They come in all kinds of forms and designs, and they use all kinds of technologies. Some would be electrical, for example, while others would be fueled entirely with the willpower of the driver. Since the entire experience of living over there is one big celebration, of course, they have all kinds of festive occasions to make it even more pleasurable. And not only the local people participate, but also the angels openly come and mingle with people. They sing, they dance, they make music. Another curious thing over there are the schools for animals. They teach them various skills with which then the animals get employed in completing tasks over there. For example, in agriculture, it would seem that once they get trained, they would be able, for example, to do field work without the need of on-spot supervision. But of course, training the animals would never involve causing them any discomfort, what to speak of unheard of things like abuse or a reproach. There is a phenomena on Mars which the locals call sickness. So what happens sometimes with souls who have recently arrived from Earth is that certain patterns of thinking and behaving from the earthly sphere begin to manifest in their personality. And they become inclined to manipulate others or, for example, hoard things like collecting luxurious items at home just to possess them, just to feel good that they possess them without actually needing them. The bodies of the infected individuals also become rough and not that good looking. They kind of start reflecting the bodies of the earthly citizens because that's where the infection came from their memories of their earthly lives. But this sickness would never become an epidemic because people know how to live and why do they live. Jesus Christ himself incarnated twice there, and it has revealed more than enough wisdom to its residents. Death on Mars is simply a conscious, peaceful transition from an incarnated body to an astral one. There is no shock because even during their Martian life, people would get chances sometime, even while alive with a gross Martian body, to experience again the astral realms of Mars. But at this point, the soul has grown in wisdom and understanding enough to realize that happiness does not depend upon the external conditions, but solely and only on the amount of goodness developed in the personality. Although the entire experience of incarnating on Mars and living in such unending joy is kind of the maximum pleasure and happiness an earthly resident can imagine, for those souls who are on Mars, as their development evolves even further, eventually they're able to realize that there are even higher spheres of existence where love can be experienced on a completely different level of which they could not even think before when they were not mature enough. Eventually, as the soul evolves further, it gets the chance for an incarnation on Jupiter for its further education of how the higher levels of love function. The life on Mars could be easily explained to an earthly resident because it's the way more or less most people here imagine heaven to be. But the situation with describing Jupiter to earthly residents is completely different. The entire form of existence of the people over there is so many levels above the earthly plane that most of the things that people over there do or think won't even make any sense to the earthly residents. Some aspects may even seem boring to the less developed people, like, for example, There is no technology on Jupiter. For people from the Earth, that's a bit hard to imagine because we need all kinds of devices for transport, for example. But the residents of Jupiter don't need them. They can travel simply with the power of their thoughts to any other planet at any time they wish. It is just the way their human body is made. The abilities with which everybody is born over there are so supernatural looking for earthly residents that actually most people on Earth imagine God to be that way. Something else that may seem quite boring to us is that they only drink water. They don't eat anything, they don't even drink fruit juices, although the vegetation is very abundant and very beautiful on Jupiter. Everything is very light over there, 15 times lighter than Earth. But this doesn't prevent plants from growing, and they're even more colorful and splendid than those of the Earth or Mars. They can even move themselves. They are not, like on Earth, firmly fixed forever at the place where they get planted. Since the planet is far away from the sun, it doesn't get enough light. But on its surface, actually, there is always light on demand, and mostly it comes from the plants, also some from the soil itself, which also supplies warmth. Pleasant and convenient as every single aspect of their life, there is no sickness, no problem, no inconvenience in any form on Jupiter. During their entire lives, the residents are in constant connection with their guardian angels. They communicate with them whenever they wish openly. There are two methods of transport on the planet: walking and flying. The first one is for shorter, very short distances, and the second one is a natural ability that they all have. If they wanna travel anywhere, they just take off in the air without the need of any other additional equipment or machinery. But they don't need to do that if they want to talk to their friends, for example, because they can do it telepathically. Means they can establish a telepathic connection with anybody they wish at any time. Their homes would look rather unimpressive to some earthly people. Some of them make kind of dwellings, others live simply under the sky, just like that, at a beautiful spot that they choose, somewhere in the lush, amazing gardens. They cannot feel cold or warm, their bodies are perfect by birth, and the external conditions simply cannot cause them any discomfort. Many of them live in the caves of an amazing crystal mountain, the celestial glow and beauty of which earthly people can never imagine. If we would apply the earthly understanding of time, the residents of Jupiter would live 1,200 years approximately. But although they get born on Jupiter because of their amazing abilities, they don't need to spend their lives on the planet. They can go to any corner of the universe to accomplish their mission. Their only mission is to help spread this harmony, beauty, and happiness of which they have become springs themselves. Usually, they take the responsibility of educating societies or group of souls which are on a lower stage of development. People on Jupiter don't get married, nor their bodies are geared for physical union with the opposite sex, but they are males and females, and they can feel attraction for each other, and then from the sparks of that love manifest the bodies of the newly arriving souls on Jupiter. There is no official birth and death there. There is no old age the way we know it. Even those who would be over 1,000 years old, according to our understanding, even they would feel and look like the young people. And when the end time approaches and it's time to cast away this body that they have received in order to live on Jupiter, they get a prior notification, so to say, and gradually they merge with the body of their next destination. When they abandon their Jupiterian bodies, they simply dissolve. They are so thin. There are no physical remains. If the most important aspects of the lives of the people on Jupiter are basically undescribable to earthly people, then what can we say about describing even higher planets like Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune? They are certainly far beyond our wildest imaginations. All the information about them here will only deliver a vague idea of some mostly unimportant aspects of their lives. Because the most important thing from their point of view, how they exactly participate in co-creating together with the Supreme Lord this wonderful universe, that is far beyond the grasp of earthly people. Everything about those planets, including the bodies of their residents, is by thousands of times lighter than those of the earthly people. Actually, from our point of view, maybe we should call them even etheric people. The residents of Saturn and Uranus have reached such heights in developing their wisdom that they simply no longer need personal guardian angels. They only have advisors connected to even higher planes of existence, which would counsel entire groups when very complex issues arise. While on Neptune, where the highest order beings in our solar system reside, they don't need any sort of medium or advisor. They're constantly in one-to-one connection with the Supreme Creator. They have severed all connection with the evil. They live in perpetual, undescribable happiness. And all they're interested in is developing further talents and skills which allow them to create parts of the universe or manage what inferior beings like us would see as wild forces of nature. Although the bodies and the environment in this planet borders what we would perceive as etheric, in reality it has got organic and non-organic matter as well. There are some plants and some animals. The beauty of the vegetation is just undescribable. And again, the planets provide eternal heating from below, which results in kind of an eternal spring on these planets. Saturn has no animal kingdom as such, only some birds. Uranus doesn't have even birds, only few insects are left. And on Neptune, it's only vegetation and humans. While on Saturn, people still drink a bit of water, when we reach Neptune, they don't need even that. Their bodies are sustained just by what they breathe from the environment. On Saturn, people live up to 3,000 years, and on Neptune, we can truly call them lords of the natural elements. The surroundings, the natural surroundings in which they reside, are fully under their mental control. With their desire only, they move the plants, they can melt the stones, and when they go to sleep, when they close their eyes to sleep, immediately all light from the surroundings ceases. And a final note on the validity of all this information. Is it really like this on those planets or not? After all, the mass media assures us that there are only barren, boring stone fields over there. At best, if not poisonous gases, everything frozen, and other horror pictures. They could be simply lying to us, or there is another possibility as well. Maybe our spaceships indeed find only inhospitable deserts. But this doesn't mean that at that very same location, on another layer of existence, there are no humans with vegetation and animals as described earlier in the video. After all, under normal circumstances, even here on Earth, we don't see the spirits, who also live right here, but just on the astral plane. Their existence have been proven by numerous stories, and yet we definitely don't see them, at least most of the time. So how would we expect to see the residents of Saturn or Neptune if they are described as almost etherical in this book? And if we don't see the people, how would we expect to see their gardens and surroundings if they have the same density as stated earlier in the book? So thank you for listening. Hope you have enjoyed my presentation, which was not a translation, by the way, not even close. I just picked some passages of the book. There is a lot more material in it. You can download the original in PDF format for free, link in the description. It's in Russian. And actually, according to some sources, this is one of the later editions of the book. The earlier editions are not there for us. And they say that they actually switched Mars with Venus in this later edition. I don't know why, but they always hide the old versions and give us only the edited form. But according to the source, fortunately, the rest of the information was delivered more or less unchanged.